Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Vacation Station Travel and Leisure Show. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're so excited to talk about train travel. I mean, this is about how our country was shaped, and it's done so much from making people actually have ways to get around the country, but it's also, changed the world of commerce in the country as well and around the world. Train travel is a massive thing. And there's so much history behind it. There's historic trails, or I should say rails, that you can go on, train journeys. There are scenic ones, and some of our guests here have done some epic ones around the world. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about trains and how they affected tourism through the arts as well. So a lot of good stuff today with some amazing guests joining us. All the links that we talk about, as always, are in the episode notes. So we've got article links from various travel writers. So all of that will be listed in the episode notes. But first, let's start it with Rose Palmer. She's a travel writer and photographer, award-winning, and she has a new podcast with us called Quilt Tripping Travel with Rose. And that is every second Thursday. And she likes quilts and she likes to travel, so she does both. And so welcome back, Rose. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. How are you?
Doing good. And everyone should know that your website is quilttripping.com. So that's one L in there. And also we've got Victoria Chick on the show. She's a contemporary figurative artist, also a collector of early 19th and 20th century prints. And she's also spearheading a project to put a fine art museum in her community of Silver City, New Mexico, which is in the Southwest region. And I'm excited about this because when we think about the Southwest, trains were a huge part of settling the West. So welcome back, Victoria. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Lisa. I'm glad to be here talking with all you wonderful people today.
Hey, this is exciting because the last podcast we did with you, and Victoria has her art podcast, the World of Art podcast, with us every third Saturday. And the last episode, we started talking about trains, and then we couldn't derail from it, could we? It's like the rabbit hole of trains, but I'm excited to talk about this today with you and talk a little bit about the arts. But the West, it's really iconic what train travel did. And so we've got our next guest is travel writer Barbara Redding, and keep up with her at barbararedding.com. Victoria is victoriachick.com. But Barbara literally just stepped off a train, the Rocky Mountaineer. We can't wait to hear about her adventures because I believe she got to see the fall colors in the Rocky Mountains. So welcome back, Barbara. How are you?
Thanks. I'm well. I'm about caught up post trip. I just got back late last week, but it was a pretty amazing trip. I did get to see fall color as well as just experience going through the Canadian Rockies. Nothing quite like them.
That's awesome. That is, I mean, the Rocky, I have not experienced the Canadian Rockies yet. Always use that word yet. Eva Eldridge is also on the show with us. She is a traveler. She's a writer and an editor. You can keep up with her at evaeldridge.com. And she's also part of the Tucson Sisters in Crime, all these awesome writers who write about crime and murder, mystery. And we love it when they come on shows because someone gets killed. Right? Eva, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the fall colors also. I'm up in New England, and we got to drive through Maine and Vermont, New Hampshire. And the colors, they tell me, are past their prime, but not to me. They were beautiful.
It's amazing how when you get, I mean, it's just like something happens to you with all that color. It's just like, wow, you become alive with it, We also have Diane Dobry back on the show, and I think she's experiencing some fall colors up in upstate New York. The first time we met her, she was living in Central Florida, but now she's upstate, and she's a food, wine, and travel writer. She loves Hungary, so her website is gettinghungary.com. She's also got Discovery Days with a Z, discoverydays.com. She writes about her adventures and also Hungarian Aquarian. So welcome back, Diane. How are you?
I'm good. A little chilly up here now. My friends in Florida are still sweltering, but I'm getting the chill, but I'm also getting the orange and the reds of the trees. And it's hard to drive without looking both ways to see, oh, look at that tree. Oh, that tree is beautiful. So
Awesome. Awesome. Now, that's what here today we are recording from an area just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. And as we're talking, golden leaves are falling. So, this is cool. So train travel is amazing how it has shaped civilizations, settled civilizations, sometimes not always in the nicest ways when we talk about settling a country or a land. But it did change life. It was one of those things like the internet changed things for us all. Train travel most certainly did that. And so we want to talk about train travel around the world and across the country. And Rose, I want to go to you because I know you love cruising, but do you think train travel is kind of like cruising because you're not having to drive? Is it similar in that way for you?
Very much so. I love train travel, and I actually go out of my way to look for opportunities to take the train when I'm traveling to different parts of the world, and have done some interesting places. New Zealand's got some nice scenic trains, and I think somebody may be talking about those. And then I did what they call the death train out in Thailand. It's now a scenic train, but it takes you through over the bridge over the River Kwai, and it talks about the history of the men that built it and how many of them died and all of that. So that was interesting. And then, of course, in Europe, whenever I'm in Europe, I just travel around by train because it's so easy and just so much more comfortable and convenient.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, even when we flew and we moved from Kenya to England and getting off and landing in London. I think we were at Heathrow or Gatwick, and taking a train up to where our family is. And that was my first experience getting on like that kind of train. We had trains in South Africa and Kenya too, but I remember being on a train in Kenya, man, and it was pretty epic. You were going through villages, there were banana trees and everything. I just remember the banana trees as a kid for some reason, but it was kind of like this great adventure, When you read historical novels, they always talk about train travel, and you kind of like, ooh, the great train adventure, So do you feel that way too? Like when you're traveling, it's like, ooh, we're going to see things, and it's like eye candy getting on there.
It is, because oftentimes the trains go through areas where there aren't roads. And so you see scenery that would not be easy to see any other way. And, a lot of train travel, it's, these days is scenically driven. It's not necessarily, point A to point B so much anymore. In Europe it still is because they have such a great train system. But there's also a lot of the scenic trains in Europe. And then, of course, here in the U.S., we've got a lot of different scenic trains and other parts of the world as well.
Exactly. I want to go to you, Barbara. Tell us a little bit about the Rocky Mountaineer, but because you actually kind of went through some national parks, right? Don't you, or no? Uh-oh. She went away. Barbara.
Nope.
Barbara, yeah, she's muted, I think. I don't know what happened.
Okay, sorry. I was slow to unmute.
I was going to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. Thank you. Yes, the Rocky Mountaineer is really a train that's all about scenery. I don't think anyone would actually take it from Vancouver to Banff, because it takes 2 days and you could drive that in less. So it's very much all about the scenery, and you leave they have basically 4 different routes. I was on what they call the first passage to the west, and that is the original route, and it traces the original British railway system that connected East and Western Canada. You can still go via Canada Rail for transportation purposes, but if you're going on the Rocky Mountaineer, you're really going to experience the scenery, and there is a lot to see. My trip, again, was a 2-day trip, and we started in Vancouver. First day was basically through British Columbia is so big. It was mostly through British Columbia, and we ended up in Kamloops. And then from Kamloops, we spent the night there. And then the second day is really when we hit the scenery, going through the really high Canadian Rockies and climbing up through the tunnels that they have constructed specifically to try to get the trains over. That's such high mountains. And then we ended up in Banff. So we skirted Glacier National Park, the Canadian version, and then we're very much in the middle of Banff National Park as we ended our journey.
Did you feel like you're on a great adventure too, boarding and not having to do anything but really feast your eyes? And then I've heard that you're also feasting on that train. I've heard.
Yes, yes. We went what they call the Gold Leaf class, and so we were treated to fine dining all the way from the first breakfast outside Vancouver until our final meal in Banff. And so we got to meet the chef who grew up in Vancouver, but his concept of food is to feed you the types of food that you could experience in that part of the country. So we had great steaks from Alberta. We also had seafood, trout, and just a variety of other foods that he said should represent the scenery that we were seeing. So it was a wonderful kind of match of food and scenery, something I had never experienced before.
I love it. I want to go to Eva because I know what everybody on the show loves good food here. We all, and some of us know how to cook it and some of us, I'm talking about myself, Mel, maybe not. But I did learn how to actually cook a spaghetti squash without exploding it. So I did learn something this year. And I learned how to do butternut squash, my two new things, right? So I got that down. Eva, you would be proud. You would be like shocked that I actually did it, but I did it. But, Eva, your travels, you've been all over the world with trains and then across the country. Can you tell us a little bit? Let's kind of focus on North America first. Because that's something so iconic of how the country was built up. So you've been all over the place in the country.
Well, I bought a 30-day rail pass. First, I bought a 7-day one and tried it out, and then I bought the 30-day one. So I've taken the train from Trinidad to Kansas City, and then from Tucson all the way around. The country I think traveling by train is elegant. And you get parts of the train that the clientele, if you're traveling coach, which is what I could afford to do, the clientele changes depending on what part of the country you're in. And I found people watching quite interesting during that. So, we've done, and I would do it again. I'm talking about doing it next year, from Bethesda to Florida, but that hasn't quite been settled. Yeah, I like traveling. I like the local trains, the commuter trains in town. When you're in Boston, we love the rail system. I'd love to see more high-speed rails. So,
didn't Tucson get that light speed rail?
No, not yet, but they're talking about it between Tucson. Oh no, it's between Vegas and LA, I think. They're trying to put in a high-speed rail. And we're talking about putting one in between Tucson and Phoenix, which would be fabulous. Oh,
because that drive, I'm sorry, I love Arizona, but that drive between Phoenix and Tucson is not one of my favorite things to do at all.
Me either.
Yeah. I want the train because I also love to see the cactus and, the Wild West, as you go through, and I think that we also need that train to go to Silver City, New Mexico. So Victoria can catch it, right? What do you think, Victoria? You need a train. You need a train.
No, we don't. But they're talking about putting one between Albuquerque and
Santa Fe.
Cruces.
Oh, Las Cruces.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
It would complete the Rio Grande run. So that would be interesting.
We went to
they've been talking.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So they've been talking about it for years, and it will. I don't know that I'll ever say that there's a date put on it when it's going to be completed, because it's just one of those things that people talk about and that it would be nice, but it doesn't happen. So that's the drawback.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because Santa Fe, is the crossroads of history really for the Southwest in regards to so much
Right,
happened. Santa Fe Trail, we've
right.
got Route 66, but they also have railroads and people do, I mean, uh, train travel out of Santa Fe happens quite a bit. And we've been to the old depot and I love these old depots that are getting turned into parks. And the
Yeah,
Rails to Trails program where you got walking paths. I've done it in Pennsylvania, Rose. I've been to
right.
Pennsylvania on one of those. Um, yeah, actually, that was in not Easton. I've got it. Lancashire. Is there a Lancashire,
But
Pennsylvania? Yeah.
yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
that's where we did this Rails to Trails plan, and it was so cool. And so I think
Right.
there's a lot of good that comes from this, but this light rail where it's actually part of public transportation is good for the environment. It's good for people. It's cost effective. But then when there's COVID or something like that, it's not so great, right? So,
Ah,
that's a whole other deal.
please.
But no, I know, but the train thing is so big in the Southwest. I think it's just so iconic. And one thing to also think about is how towns used to vie for the trains to come to them. Yerington, Nevada is one of them that we've been to a gazillion times, and that town changed its name three times. At one time, it was Greenfield. It's in Smith Valley, Greenville, then Pison Switch because it was known for. This is south of Reno, right? And back in the day, people were drinking whiskey more than water because the water wasn't so palatable. But the whiskey, they called it Pison Switch because it's pison is poison. And the people
Yes.
making the whiskey would just throw tobacco in. They'd throw all kinds of weird stuff in there. And it tasted so bad that everybody thought it was whiskey. And they drank it. I mean, this is in the 1800s. Then the town wanted they wanted a train to go there because it would help them, especially because they had mining going on. And so they named their town Yerington the third time. That was the third name, trying to influence Mr. Yerington, who was one of the heads of the railroads. And that didn't quite work. And so they have
Oh,
the name Yerington and no train. Yeah. But they have wild horses out there. They have one of the biggest geocaching collections, like 14,000. If you're into geocaching, there's over 14,000 caches in the Smith Valley
oh
and Hines
my.
Valley. Isn't that crazy? And it is shaped
It
like an
is.
eagle if you go from an aerial view, it's shaped as an eagle, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
So, and they have a drive-in, but it's not working anymore. But, and old drive-ins, that's a whole other show. See, rabbit hole. But, the train thing, Victoria, for the Southwest, when we look at the country, that's part of the Harvey House history too, right? With
Well,
the Harvey
well, yes.
girls.
Okay, Mr. Harvey came over here from England, and somehow he found his way to Topeka, Kansas, and he loved it. So so that was where he started working, and he's developing the Harvey House, and he was in time for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway. So that was his starting point, and it went. He started in Topeka, went through Atchison, wound up in Santa Fe. Gradually, that railroad was absorbed by another railroad, so it wound up going clear to the coast. But I mean, when people are traveling, they want to travel in comfort. We've already talked about that. That's one of the joys of train travel is that it's very comfortable. And but before it was quite so comfortable, back in the early 1900s, they had to stop fairly often because they were steam engines and they had to get water. So every place there was a water stop, there was likely to be some kind of place where you could get some refreshment yourself. And so the Harvey houses sprang up along the railroad right of way. So in fact, we had one here at Deming at one time because that was a major route. But there were some famous ones. One of them was in Santa Fe, and that building, the original building, was torn down. I think, oh gosh, about close to 50 years ago, 45 or 50 years ago. And, but several of them are still in business, and they were famous. There was you guys remember Will Rogers? He said, like one time, that Fred Harvey kept the West in food and wives, because he hired cute girls and they were his Harvey House girls. So that they were known for their hospitality anyway, their food. And the Alvarado was his main hotel, the one that's torn down. You can see pictures of it though. There's a museum in Santa Fe where you can check all about Fred Harvey. And that was a genius of a marketer. That's all I can say. And
they're all over. There's still a lot of those hotels are gone, but the Petrified Forest National Park has a hotel that were run by the Harvey girls, and also if you go in the Mojave Desert, north of 29 Palms and Joshua Tree, there's a Mojave Trails National Recreation Area. So there's Roy's, which you must stop there. It's an old motel kind of diner thing on Route 66 by the Amboy Crater and Amboy Lake, which I thought was a lake and found out it's not a lake anymore years ago. But off of that in Mojave, the National Preserve is right up between that and Vegas, and you go through Nipton, and there is the depot there, the Kelso Depot, which we've been to, and the National Park Service redid the depot and opened it up, and we went to the opening. And what's so cool is they have the jail on the outside of the depot, and the Harvey House girls were doing stuff out there too. But the jail is out there, so if they were taking criminals on the trains, they would leave them outside in the desert. And I have been there at night, and I have seen what's going on in the wildlife zone, bugs and birds and bats, right? So if you were a criminal, you were literally on the outside, and whatever came in and got you. And I'm just saying, that's a whole other train thing. But the Harvey House girls were everywhere in the West, man. And their stories are amazing, you know?
I don't know. We saw Fred Harvey, trains sort of died off for a while. I mean, as far as passenger service goes, it was really, really, really greatly, incredibly popular during the 40s and early 50s. And then as more people got cars that were good for long distance, train traffic, passenger traffic dwindled a little bit, and more people started driving cars. So Fred Harvey started Turnpike service, and I know he did it along the Kansas Turnpike, and I'm sure he did it. It was done under his name other places, but I don't know. I've never run across it, but I didn't know anything about trains the first time I heard about Fred Harvey in 1952 and driving across Kansas when the Turnpike was there. So I guess things morph into other substances.
Technology changes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So anyway, I mean, it's hard to me. It's hard to beat railroad travel, and as far as Fred Harvey goes, I mean, one of the things that he did to popularize travel was he started making posters of the Southwest. And the Southwest was becoming popular before that because it was word of mouth. But now he started really advertising train travel and what they would see when they would get to their destination. So people had a destination in mind when they would go to the Southwest. Going to Santa Fe was like going to another country.
Mm-hmm. It was. I mean, that's because it's the newer side. And, of course, the indigenous people have been here for, a long, long time. But so that's the first, when we talk about history in our country, we've got to think of the indigenous people first, right? But then when you think about, now it's like, ooh, the Wild West. And it was like, wow, we're going to conquer deserts. We're going to go through mountains. We're going to go through all of this. And trains had a place in it. And at the end of this podcast, we're probably going to hear from David Crizzo as well, at the end of the podcast. So everyone, as we close up this conversation, which we're not done yet. Listen, for that, we have a Hollywood history segment from Steve Schneickert on Jamestown. So you think about the West. So the trains helped with mining, and Railtown 1897 is a state park in California. And it's in Jamestown, which is a mining town. It was like the talk about motherlode country. It is right outside Yosemite National Park. But this train, it's part of, the Sierra Railway, and it was known as the Movie Railroad. And it's one of the most photographed railroads in the world. And it's home to industrial heritage, railroad history. And so anyway, we've got Steve's Hollywood history segment at the end for you. So you can hear that, because it's so important to go back and look at how railroads were created, the history of them, and to what is now, where we're talking about these light speeds. So we're going to come back to you in a second, Victoria, but I want to go to Diane, because Diane likes Amtrak. So this is where it's completely changed, yet you still get food on board, right? And we can still take our own food, or no? I don't know. I want to do that. I'm kind of intrigued of just taking Amtrak and being able to work on the rails instead of work on the road.
Well, I started as a commuter. I lived around the corner from a train station, and I began commuting to New York City. And when I would have to go to different conferences, a lot of them were in Washington, D.C. One was in Boston, and now I'm up close to Albany, so I still take Amtrak down to Long Island to see my kids and grandkids. But early on, and I've taken the auto train to Florida a number of times. Early on, they had the lounge where you could get something to eat, hot dogs or some kind of sandwich or nachos and drinks. And on the auto train, they have a dining car with the tablecloths and stuff. My understanding is that the dining has changed. The first time I went was 2015, and you would pick your dinner hour and you would go and sit down, and but it was like you're on a line, and it's like, okay, let's fill in these tables. So you're sitting at me as a solo traveler. I was always sitting with 3 to 5 other people at a table that I've never met, and it was interesting. You got to meet people and have good conversations. But breakfast was at 6 a.m. to 9, I believe. And I would always, because if I was sleeping coach, it was like right in the middle. Everybody was sleeping together, and it was not the most comfortable. So I would get up at 6 and get my breakfast and kind of drag myself out. By the time we got to the destination in either Florida or Virginia. But recently, I've been on Amtrak. On the auto train, it was kind of different. I did have a roomette where I could get my meal brought to me. So I had my dinner brought to me in the roomette, which I loved because I could just relax and eat the dinner. And they're really good. Some of the meals on the train are really good. But on the Amtrak local, the regional, I should say, from Albany down to New York City, there's been no snacks on board recently. So
it's kind of like airplanes. Here's your bag of peanuts. Has kind of gone away, hasn't that too? Like in a way, there's like it's just
I wonder
changed.
if it happened during the pandemic or if it's a budgetary thing. But yeah, and I've taken trains in Germany and Hungary and the UK, and I didn't see anything about eating except a friend of mine said she took the Belmond rail trips through Scotland, and it's high-end luxury dining on board, and but they're like 10,000 to 12,000 a person for a train.
Well, yeah, see, that's what South Africa, the blue train, which is famous for going up the garden route in South Africa, which is gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. You have the Tsitsikamma National Forest. You're going through coastal areas that are rugged, right? That's kind of like Oregon and maybe like Maine. Haven't been to Maine, but from the photos, that rugged rock and just dramatic, right? But you've got all the proteas and the sugar birds, oh my gosh, it is the bee the bee eaters and it's like they're big hummingbirds, right? And it's so vibrant, and it was about the food. It was about this luxury experience. So I want to go to Rose on this because so you did the Orient Express, which I think has always been kind of people's bucket list, right? And then you also sent me a link to an article of you doing a Christmas train trip. And a lot of people talk about Christmas cruises, but this was a Christmas train trip, which is interesting.
Yes. So for our 30th anniversary, my husband and I treated ourselves to the Venice Simplon Orient Express, which, it brings up images of Agatha Christie and all these elegant clothes from the 20s. That original Orient Express train was disbanded in the, I think in the late 80s. The company and I forget the name of the company now, but it is in my article. But they purchased a lot of the old train cars from that time period and put it together.
Oh, the Pullman. Are you talking about Pullman?
Well, Pullman is in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but this is they're part. I think they're part of the company, but they named it the Venice Simplon Orient Express and do some of the routes that were done on the original Orient Express. And my husband and I, the route that we actually did was from Venice. It was an overnight from Venice to London. And part of that trip was the UK portion was on the Pullman train that we took from the coast up into London. But the Venice Simplon Orient Express portion of the train started in Venice and then overnighted and went through Paris and then took us up to the coast, where we then got on a bus and went through the Channel and then got on the Pullman train. And it truly was, as you said, just like the one in South Africa, which I would love to do. It is a luxury experience. We were on these beautifully restored cars from the 20s and 30s, from the heyday of train travel in Europe. And so we're talking all this marquetry and mahogany and beautiful embellishments and glass embellishments throughout the train. In fact, one of the dining cars is decorated with different Lalique glass ornamentation, and it was just beautiful. So it's yes, it is pricey, and it's definitely one of these things that you know is a once in a lifetime, and that we indulged in for our special anniversary. And as Barbara said, on the Rocky Mountaineer, on the Orient Express, food is at the forefront. It's a highlight of the trip. So besides sitting in your antique car cabin in your car and looking at the scenery, then you go to one of three restored antique cars for the meals, and you do a lunch in one car, you do dinner in a different car, and then breakfast or brunch the next morning in the third car, so that you get to experience each one of these dining cars. Each one is unique and has different decorations and ornamentation. And the food, as you imagine, is absolutely gorgeous, beautifully presented, beautiful tastes. It's something that you probably might have in a Michelin restaurant, I guess.
Wow.
And then because that's not enough food, then you also get afternoon tea in your cabin delivered, breakfast in the cabin, and then then you have a later brunch, lunch in the cabin. So it was a very special and memorable experience. And they so to give you an idea of what the experience is like and what's expected, our tickets were actually booklets that were shipped to us packaged in pretty boxes. And then I'm reading through the booklet, and one of the lines in there is, "You cannot be overdressed for this experience and for dinner." And
Wow. I'm in trouble.
Gowns and tuxes are not required, but recommended. Suits
Wow.
definitely required, and suit coats for men, and cocktail gowns for women. So I had a separate bag that we carried around. So before we got on the train, we toured. We were in Venice for a week, so we had a separate bag just with our train things, because the cabin is small, and so they only want you to have whatever you're going to need for that day and that the night and the next day, and then the rest of your luggage gets stored in the luggage compartment.
Wow.
So yeah, we're traveling around with a bag with all these fancy clothes for our train, and people dressed up. I'm telling you, Pete, there were plenty of tuxes and long gowns, and the jewelry
That's
came
cool,
out.
though.
It was wonderful. I mean, it really made the whole event so special. And it started with a cocktail hour in the
Yay.
bar lounge with piano player, tickling the ivories, and then we moved on into the dining car, and it was definitely a very memorable anniversary trip. So we started in Venice, went through Paris, saw beautiful scenery. Unfortunately, the weather didn't cooperate as we went through the Alps, and it was a little bit overcast and cloudy, so I didn't quite get the view of the Alps I was hoping for. But then, went through the Channel, and then on the other side in the UK, we grabbed the British Pullman, which is another historic train that took us from the coast up into London. And so my second story that you mentioned about going to the Christmas markets, I got my first taste of the British Pullman on that anniversary trip. And then when my husband and I went back to the UK around December time for kind of around the holidays, I looked to see what the British Pullman was offering as day trips. So besides being part of this Orient Express route, they also offer mostly daily, I think, day trips from London, from Victoria Station, to different destinations that are within a day's trip. You can go to Highclere, which is the Downton Abbey mansion. You can go to Winchester, which is where I went. They have a whole variety of themes that they do. And so it worked out that while we were there, they were offering this day trip to the Winchester Cathedral for the Christmas market. And that was just, again, it was a lovely day on the train. It's a historic train. You get on, you're offered brunch. And then we arrived in Winchester. It included a tour of around the city and the Winchester Cathedral. And then you get back on you have time to wander around the Christmas market and do some nice shopping, which of course I did. And then we got back on the train and for dinner. And so as the train was heading back into London, we were offered this wonderful, again, dinner on board. So complete with the crackers.
Well, listen, this is amazing. Oh, the crackers where you pull them? The Christmas crackers?
Yes. Not crackers. So
not crackers, food, but the Christmas crackers, those little
crackers,
toilet paper rolls that are decorated.
Right.
You pull them and little things fall out like the little fish that moves on your hand. I love that. And you put the little crown on. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You know what? Our friend Glenn Burrows, who runs Norfolk Tours in England, and everyone hears him on the show too. One year he sent us a box of crackers from England. Ooh, and we opened them up in Saguaro National Park on New Year's Day with our friend Rondi, and it had snowed. Remember that, even the snow that we had, it stuck for at least one day in Tucson, and we drank champagne on New Year's Day and pulled Christmas crackers in the park. Don't tell the park rangers, but remember Tucson actually had some snow for a while? It stuck for one whole day, and I think the next day it was gone, right? Isn't that how it always is?
Usually, that's how it is, and we're glad.
I know. Trust me, I am too. But this is so fascinating about these international ones. Speaking of Pullman, I mean, that's a huge name in train travel and train history. Eva, you went to Chicago on a train. So there's Pullman National Historical Park. I don't know if you've been there, but I'm just saying it's one of our newest national park units, not an actual national park, but a monument, right? One of those, but within the National Park Service. Have you been there when you
No,
went to Chicago? Just saying.
no.
Well, when you go again.
When we go again.
Anybody been there on this? Was it, and it's controversial too, because Pullman wasn't always as nice, to his workers apparently. So but it pays, homage to those who were in that industrial setting and creating, like Detroit has the cars, Chicago had trains. So it's pretty interesting that, as we talk about all of this, Barbara, I want to ask you, as a travel writer, and I know you travel the globe. I mean, I think the first time I met you, you just come back from Morocco, on the show. But have you done train travel? I know you did Canada, so it's North America. Any train travel throughout the rest of the globe?
Yes, Europe, I guess, as Rose and others have mentioned, it's really the only way to travel. It's just so much easier to do than flying between cities, and you end up in the middle of the city, which is, just far more convenient than flying most places. But I also took trains in Morocco, and South America, a couple places, and I'm kind of like, I think some of the others, if there's an option to take a train, I would love to do it. Speaking of Chicago, I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and my grandmother lived in Chicago. And we used to take that train between, northern Indiana to Chicago. And it was a great way to travel. I have great memories of doing that as a kid. And I think that's what is kind of sad, as others have mentioned, is that riding the train kind of fell out of favor because of all the money we put into the highway system. But I think it's very exciting to having just experienced the Rocky Mountaineer and hearing about other train opportunities. There's now the train between Miami and Orlando that I'd love to take one day. So I think it's exciting. I do hope that future generations will have more train opportunities in the United States that mirror the just fabulous train experiences that you can have in Europe and in other parts of the world.
I know. I always look at, when people, even the cargo trains, right? Always looking at it going, what are they seeing? Someone's in there, someone's seeing something that we're not seeing from the road, right? It's just kind of this other thing, and even wildlife, I don't know if you saw any wildlife on the Rocky Mountaineer, but I know people have seen wildlife because the wildlife gets used to the train being part of their backyard, it seems like.
Right. And we were looking really hard. We did see some bald eagles. We saw, some ospreys, some different birds. We were really hoping for a moose or a bear, but we saw some mountain goats. That's about the extent of the wildlife. But that's what I've understand, is that they are familiar with the train, so they know kind of when the train is going to come and when it isn't. They're not afraid of it, but I think they like their privacy, I guess. I'll put it that way.
Well, you did the Durango train. I know there's like one in Verde Valley, Arizona, that you can see like bald eagles in certain times of year. Like now is a good time,
Right.
to see the bald eagles. But you've done like the Durango one to Silverton, right? Which is pretty epic as well. Cause Colorado, I mean, and I know Eva can chime in on Colorado, that, it's epic. That's an epic trip, and it's part of history, right? To see all that beauty. I mean,
yes, that was really a spectacular train ride. I felt like really glad that I had the chance to do that and see that scenery. And Silverton is really just such a cute town, and is really the best way to get there is on the train. And they have it, kind of set up as an old West town. And you really kind of get the experience of riding the train into the Old West, really.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing of what I was talking about, the Southwest and into the West. Trains really changed everything. I mean, Tombstone, Arizona is another mining camp, right? Back in the day, and they even moved the town to another location according to what was going on with the mines and all this kind of stuff. And I've interviewed some people who have written actual cookbooks from the past. Tombstone, you can go there and go to the Big Nose Kate Saloon. It's outside Tucson for those who haven't been there. The OK Corral's very famous and the movie and everything. But when you really go back into its history, they were living in tents and the restaurants were in tents. It was a tent city, but they were serving oysters back then in the 1800s because of trains coming in. Whenever there was a mining town, here comes the train because we need to deliver the ore and the silver and the gold and all of that. So it's really interesting that people are sitting in the middle of Tombstone in the desert eating oysters. I mean, that's amazing. And it's all because of trains. Yeah. Right. I mean, Victoria, you're in the Southwest. It is pretty amazing, isn't it? To think of
Yeah.
that.
I'm thinking how many people got sick. Anyway, but yes, it is amazing, and I'm glad to hear your other guests mention these kind of railroads that are sort of been restored, because riding those things is really fun. Durango Silverton is fabulous, I think. Verde Canyon is very interesting. There's another one that nobody mentioned is the Cumbres and Toltec, which is in New Mexico, up in northern New Mexico. Anyway, all these trains, I think are really, really interesting. And the people that you mentioned once were once a railroad person, you're always a railroad person. And it takes people like that to make these things, get these things restored and make them continue serving, the interest of people like us that really enjoy riding trains.
Oh, and speaking of the one up in New Mexico that you're talking about, the Toltec one, everyone, I've got a link in the episode notes for an interview we did with bed and breakfast owners up in Chama, New Mexico. And he actually was the train dude, the head of the train thing. The train man.
That's good.
And so you can hear about it. He talks about the history of it, and they do all kinds of dinners like you're all talking about. And so this is just fascinating to me about everyone talking about, these different experiences. Eva, I want to go to you on this in traveling, because you did it in China. You went on a train in China, right? When you were there. And I think Diane, you did the same thing. I'm not sure. Eva, I know you traveled in China, and I know Diane, you did a little bit of that on. So
No.
Eva, did you
No,
do it or no?
we were on a bus once, and we did not do the train. That was 1986. We weren't quite ready for train travel at that point.
Okay, but Diane, you did train travel in China, is that right?
I've been looking at train travel, and one of my close companions is Chinese and says, you have to see what's going on in China. And he's just been sending me all these links to the high-speed rails, and I was really amazed because they have one train that doesn't even need rails. It goes on the road, and it hovers slightly above the road. And then they have the high-speed rail that, it's basically you get on, you sleep, and you can get to Shanghai. But when you were talking about the high-speed rail plans, like the Bright Line in Florida is a high-speed rail. There's the high-speed rail, it's hsrail.org, shows the plans for the U.S. of, what they would like to do. But I think, people like to be in their own cars in the U.S. and they like to be on planes and get there quickly. But I don't think they realize the freedom of being on a train and how it's comfortable. It's more comfortable than driving. You're not sitting in traffic. You have more space than on an airplane, and you can bring your luggage, so it's kind of above you. So I am always amazed when people don't want to take a train somewhere, but I guess our country is not geared up for that yet. Hopefully we will.
I think we need to at some point in our lives quit thinking of trains as transportation getting to between point A and point B. And we need to start thinking of ourselves as travelers, because when you're traveling, things happen. and sometimes there are things you can't control. Sometimes there are things you have to figure out how to get around. I took Amtrak to go to my 50th high school school reunion in Kansas City. It was a wonderful trip. I loved it. And coming back, we boarded the train to return at night, and we went to bed. Well, the next morning, we had not reached Topeka yet because there was a derailment on the tracks some distance beyond us that we were going to have to get around. So we had to wait, and that made us operate differently. We became travelers at that point, and we figured out we had tools to work with. We had our cell phones, for goodness sake, and we could call ahead, and the airplane connection we were supposed to get in Albuquerque, we weren't going to make it, and so we decided we tried to rent a car at the airport. No, they wouldn't rent us a car unless we brought it back to the airport, which was 200 miles away from where we were going. So we had to get creative. We wound up getting off the train at Lammy and renting a car there, and then driving the last 500 miles home, or what seemed like 500 miles. But that wasn't a bad experience. It was a good experience because it was a challenge. And it's not like there's going to be a bus along every single 15 minutes to pick you up. So you sometimes just have to go with the flow.
Well, that's travel, because there's always something in travel, right? And we always say, like, if you don't get a flat tire on your road trip, you aren't trying hard enough.
If the dog doesn't bite you at your accommodation, things happen.
Things happen, and I think train transport, like what Eva's talking about, going between Phoenix and Tucson, that is important, because the congestion on the roads and just how we need something that's just going to go and we can get back and forth, and there's going to be delays once in a while. But yeah, it's different. Right. And I think these experiences that all of you are talking about and sharing are amazing, because this is kind of this way to see the world with a different pair of glasses on, right? You're seeing the world, you're seeing villages, you're seeing towns, you're seeing farmhouses, you're seeing all these different things, wildlife, fall colors, snow, all of this is amazing. Is it New Zealand that you went to? I got to get myself straight on who's been where. I'm getting all these messages and I'm like, all right, she's been here, she's been there. But, Eva, was it New Zealand?
Yeah, we took the train in New Zealand because we didn't have a car. We weren't going to rent a car, and we were going to hike the Milford Track. So we got on the train in Christchurch and took it. And it was an adventure because, there were sheep on the track and the train stopped. We missed our connection, and the people in this little dinky town sent a guy in a car to come get us at the train station to meet up with the train later. It was just incredible because we were so late.
This is the way it is. I mean, let's go. Rose, have you had that? Travel, you're going to have to deal with it when it happens, right? That's it. When things go wrong, they go wrong. And have you dealt with that in any trains or cruises or any of that?
So at some point we need to talk about one of the family legends that we have in my family, resulting from the first trip I did with my kids to Europe. And the story always starts with, do you remember the time Mom got us lost in Belgium? And that was as a result of train travel. And my response always is, I was not lost. I knew I was in Belgium. So it's a long story, much too long for what we have now. But sometimes things go wrong, and you just adapt. And you figure it out. And on that particular experience, my kids got to see exactly how we had to figure it out. So I'll just leave it there.
Barbara, what about you? Have you had any of those hiccups?
I can't think. I mean, actually, one of my funnier stories is I ended up on the wrong train when I was in Poland, and the train was delayed. I missed my connection and just took a chance in following the advice of someone who nodded and said that was the right train. It turns out it was the wrong train. But that's also where I happened to meet up with a woman who had been a nanny in the U.S. and who told me that her town had the largest statue of Jesus in the world, and she took me to see Jesus.
Oh my gosh, this is great.
So that turned out to be a very amazing detour that
Wow.
I'll never forget.
See, that's it. That's exactly it. That's travel brings detours. Diane, what about you? I know that you like sleeping on Amtrak, or you're learning about it, right? Victoria tried to sleep on Amtrak and stayed in the same place.
Yeah.
She got birthed literally in her birth. But yeah, Diane, you're looking at that overnighting on Amtrak.
Well, I've been on the auto train like 4 times and slept, and I much prefer the roomettes, but to coach, and it is a lot pricier. But I had posted in the chat that I also remembered looking at train travel, and I found that Amtrak had you could apply for a grant to ride on Amtrak trains and write, but for several months. It wasn't even just like you would be like what is it, like an ambassador, an Amtrak ambassador, and just be a writer. So I did apply for that, but I think they only do it like once a year where you can apply for that.
Huh, that's interesting. Now, have you been derailed or detoured on your train travels?
Have I been derailed?
Or detoured, I should say. Derailed doesn't sound good.
Detoured only once. I was on a train I don't like driving, and I didn't want to go on the I-4 from Orlando to Tampa for the IFTWA conference in St. Petersburg. So I said, well, I'm going to take Amtrak. It was only $14 to get to Tampa, but a train in front of us was derailed or something, and I was sitting in Lakeland, and they said, we don't know how long it's going to be, and I was trying to go on a walking tour, so I ended up calling an Uber from Lakeland to Tampa, which cost me $75.
Wow. So that goes to Victoria's point.
Yeah. But the trip back was great.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
But that's a thing. You get detoured, and anybody in travel, it's like, I mean, at this point, even just in driving, Nancy and I go, all over, and the last few months has been a little insane, trying to dodge hurricanes and things. And it says, oh, it's going to take this long in your GPS, right? And it doesn't. So I always add in 2 hours, but I'm starting to now think I have to add in 4 because it's just not, because we have so much, road construction and things like that. So I wonder about that for trains too, that they've got to do all this maintenance and close things down and open them up. But let's close it up with each of you talking about actual train experience that you think is the best or most memorable, and one that you want to do that you haven't done yet. Let's go around with that.
Gosh.
Eva, I'm going to you. Yeah, Eva, come on. What is one of the most memorable ones? And one that you want to do?
That was the one going around the country for 30 days. That was very memorable. And it was difficult because I had a huge bag and had to lug that all over. But besides that, it was great because you can get up and walk around and you can go eat. And I used to sign up for the dinners at the dining car and sit with people and talk to strange people that I never met. So that was cool. And I would like to ride the trains in Europe. That's my next one.
Ooh, very cool. Very cool. So everyone keep up with Eva at evaeldridge.com. So I want to go up to you, Rose, most memorable, and the next one that you want to do.
It's hard to top the Orient Express, but in terms of memorable, I do need to put in a plug for the Japanese train system and their high-speed bullet trains or Shinkansens. And just a perfect example of how you can have the efficiency of getting from point A to point B, and at the same time also seeing great scenery. It's if you ever go to Japan, you need to do one of those bullet trains and just see how well, there's no better word than efficient. It's like if it says it's going to be there at 12:01, it will be there at 12:01, and if it's a minute late, they get on the intercom and apologize for it being late. So that's just the Japanese culture.
Wow.
Yeah. And then as far as what's on my bucket list for train travel, I would love to do the Trans-Siberian train, but I think right now, because of what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, it's not running like it used to. So I don't know if and when that will ever come back to where it crosses all of Asia from China all the way into Europe. But I think I definitely want to do the one in Africa. That's definitely on my bucket list.
Oh,
So
that's cool. Yeah,
I might have to call you for some information and pointers on that trip.
I'm telling you, man, there's nothing like the garden route. I mean, but it's been years. I mean, it's been half my lifetime ago, but we did just do some interviews about it, and I'll connect you with travel writers through IFTWA, the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association. And, it's just one of these the scenery, it is so beautiful. I mean, Milkwood Forest in Sitsikama, and it almost looks like manzanita trees, I don't know. It's just, they say South Africa is a world in one country, and that train ride goes through some of that most pristine. And then they really know food and wine over there. Wine is exceptional in South Africa. There's nothing like it. So I'm just saying, you got to do that. Yeah, you got to do that. And don't forget, yeah, I can come with you and help record a podcast. Okay.
Okay.
I'll go back to South Africa in a heartbeat for sure. So what about you, Barbara? Most memorable and one that you want to go on?
Well, I guess I'd have to say the most memorable is the Rocky Mountaineer, just because I just got off. So
and she's all like, yeah,
it's
you're still living it.
It's very fresh in my memory. So the service, the scenery, and it was a great group of people. So I think it's the kind of trip that is more fun with a group too. So I think being as part of a press trip, a lot of interesting, fun people that I got to know. Some Brits, somebody from Australia, New Zealand. So it was an eclectic group. So I enjoyed that a lot. I also was remembering, that I had also taken the bullet train in China and in South Korea. And I don't know if they were quite up to the Japanese, but it is a great way to travel in both places, just so fast and so efficient. So that's great. As far as the future, now that I've done the Rocky Mountain in Canada, I would love to try their Moab to Denver. They have a relatively new route, and it's supposed to be pretty spectacular. I've been to both Denver and Moab and driven between them, but the train sounds like it might be fun.
This is sounding good. I like it. So I've got to go, Diane, most memorable, and where do you want to go next?
My most memorable trip was my first trip to Europe was to a conference in Salzburg, and everybody left and went back to New York, and I said, well, I've never been to Europe, so I got on a train. I had to climb way up over the train tracks on a very high stairway back down so I could get to the correct track. And I went to Vienna and explored Vienna, and I loved it. And it's got me, that was one of the things that got me hooked. But I want to do a train trip that is combined with cruising, but I want to do the UK and EU, just trains and boats.
I want trains, cookies, and cocktails. That's what I want. Just sounds right. Victoria, I want to ask you your most memorable and what you want to do, but I would be in trouble if I didn't bring up Raymond Loewy, and I hope I'm saying his name correctly this time.
Well, okay. Well, Raymond Loewy, you guys sounds like you've traveled enough by train that you have all benefited from Raymond Loewy's work. He was a Frenchman who came to the United States. He was in many different fields, all involving design or clothing or something aesthetic. But he wound up, and he was an engineer too. He not a train engineer, an electrical engineer. So he wound up inventing streamlining of trains. So he developed the concept of streamlining. He was influenced by Art Deco, and so all of his trains that were built in the 1930s and 1940s influenced the design first of steam engines and then of diesel engines. So wow. The streamliner that for a while there, every train that was a transcontinental train then came to be called a streamliner, and that was his contribution. He besides the actual engine, he designed for really high end travel for passengers. He designed special silverware, special tablecloths. He designed the plates. He designed the goblets. He just went crazy, and he became extremely wealthy and extremely well known worldwide among people who knew a lot about trains or who wanted to develop railroad lines. So anyway, that's basically like Raymond Loewy. And I understand that he was very handsome and extremely charming.
He was the 007, shaken, not stirred, of trains.
Yeah. right.
Hey, listen, martinis on trains, like that sounds good. That sounds like a good trip to me. Victoria, your most memorable train trip?
Well, it has to be my first one, which I took when I was 11 years old in 1956. And I was going to go, I went from St. Paul, Minnesota to Dubuque, Iowa, a very exotic location. And I met my father there, and he wound up driving me back to where we lived. But it was a real thrill to be on a train because it was elegant. Even then, I mean, St. Paul to Dubuque, that does not sound elegant, but I was 11 years old. And it was, because I mean, I dressed up for it. I wore white gloves to get on.
No way, that's cool.
Had a wonderful meal, and it was. I still remember it. It was the best chicken salad I ever had. So,
wow.
But the thing that was memorable about it is I haven't forgotten it, and it set the tone for me for train travel. It's something I really enjoy doing still.
Wow. That's amazing when you think about white gloves. You know, people used to dress up and put the hats on like you're going to church, right? It's like you wear church clothes to go on the train. It's like, I'm going on the train.
Hey,
if anybody watches, I was going to say Hyacinth Bouquet from Are You Keeping Up Appearances on TV? It is. She is that. Or the QE2. That's for the cruises. But yeah, that's amazing thinking about that childhood memory. Yeah.
Right.
I just remember going, don't stick your head out because you'll get coal in your face. Like that's going through.
But then when I got on Amtrak, you know, times have changed. We don't wear white gloves to events anymore. So I think I was wearing jeans probably, but it was a similar experience for me. It was new. It was new again. And I have a feeling that every time I step onto a train step, it's always going to be a new experience.
Mm-hmm.
I might know a little bit more what to expect, but you never know. And I think that's what makes it's like you're being whisked off into the night and you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes travel exciting.
And when you're on a train and you see people's houses all lit up and you're wondering, are they having dinner? What's going on? Are they watching TV? You know, is the husband
Right.
and wife dancing in front of the TV? You know, what's going on? Are they farmers? Like, do they have chickens they're tending to? Is a calf being born? You know, that's you guys are all writers and, you know, all of you on the show. So it's like that people watching that Eve was talking about, that to me is about, that's the highlight of it all, is just trying to figure us all out. But where do you want to go? Like, what train experience do you want, Victoria?
Well, Mike and I were talking about going to the transcontinental. I guess I won't know the exact their exact name for it, but it's the one that goes across Canada. And
anybody here
I wanted to
know what she's talking about on that. Any of the travel writers been on this?
And it goes through the Rockies, and I don't know where it ends up actually.
Well, I think it's via rail has a route that you can take all the way across. That might be what you're thinking.
Okay,
of.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Ooh, that's cool. That sounds awesome. It's a good way to go. And you don't have to have the stress of driving, because the stress of driving is about everybody else on the road but yourself. So that's that, and deer and armadillos. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a fun chat. Let's all get on the train and go choo-choo. And who doesn't want the choo-choo? Right? Isn't that part of it too? So thank you all so much. Again, everyone's links to their websites are in the show notes, links to articles and all kinds of good stuff. And here we're going to go to Steve Schneickert's Hollywood History, and hopefully David Crizzo as well, who loves Amtrak. So hopefully we'll get him on there. But if not, there's a link to an episode, a recording I did with him earlier in the year about Amtrak. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye.
So as I was saying, everyone, we thought we would get David Crizzo on the show, and he is here. And I encourage you to go to his website, dektraveljournal.com. Now, David is an avid cruiser and trainer. Can I say trainer? Train travel lover. What would you say if you're a train, like we're road tripper? What would you say?
Let's say rail traveler. That's the way to say
rail traveler. Okay. That's because that's kind of interesting. We always say you're a road tripper, you're a cruiser, So, okay, a rail traveler. I like that. So for you, when did your fascination for train travel happen?
It all began back when I was approximately 3 years old. I remember going on the Stockholm Railroad, which is in North Jersey. It's up near the New York State border, and sadly that steam train excursion is long gone, out of business. And but I've been on a few other excursions long after that. I've taken the C&O steamer 614 from Hoboken to Port Jervis back in 1998. I've been on the Durango and Silverton back in 1992 from Durango and Silverton, Colorado. And I've been on the Manitou Springs, the Manitou and Colorado Springs Cog Railway in Colorado Springs back in 97.
So you've done a little bit of different parts of the country, and a lot of these are historic and also scenic, right?
They are.
Yeah. So which one, and then I know you love Amtrak from the first time we talked on the show with the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association podcast we do. You love Amtrak too.
I've been an avid Amtrak traveler myself ever since I was 5.
Since you were 5. So when you look at Amtrak, would you look at it as a way to travel and experience the country as a traveler, or would you look at it as a kind of source of transportation?
I would treat it as both. Because when you fly, you're missing what's down there. When you drive, if you're driving somewhere to a destination and you're behind the wheel, you don't have the time to look out the window. You gotta keep focused on what's in front of you in your lane. There's modes of transportation that are, economic, that save you time and money, but there's a downside to driving and flying because there's so much you're missing out on. When you're on the train, there is so much that you are experiencing on the left or the right or in front of you or in the back of you. And
you can see.
And further, also, you're surrounded by other people who are in the same boat as you or on the same train as you, not boat.
Yeah. So is it also about meeting people?
Yes, definitely. I've had chances of meeting people from around the company. I've met avid football fans. I've met college students from my alma mater, from schools nearest to where I went to school. So we all share some stories back and forth.
Have you traveled on trains outside the country at all?
I've been in Italy. I've also taken the train in London, from King's Cross to Duxford. And my dad and I we flew to London and we visited the Imperial War Museum out in Duxford, which is in the English countryside. And we got to see old warplanes from the Royal Air Force Base. And in Italy, I've had the pleasure of riding on the Ferrovia dello Stato. That's the Italian railroad, and also on the Pendolino, which is the counterpart of the Acela.
So when you've done these kind of trains, like there's the transportation and travel, right? The travel experience as a traveler. How much of it also really you're getting to experience these things like the World War II planes, right? I mean, when you go on a cruise, a lot of times they have these excursions. Is that the same thing in train travel? When you go on different excursions that, hey, you can hop off and go do an excursion and then come back on the train. Does that happen?
Not really.
Okay.
Sometimes if you go on a group trip, I remember one time my family took the train up to Springfield, Mass, and there was a group trip to Sturbridge Village, which is about half an hour east of Springfield. And we all visited Springfield, Sturbridge. We walked around, we did our thing, and then we got back on board the bus and we went to dinner at this big restaurant. We all ate as a whole group. And then after that, we headed back to Springfield Union Station and we got back on our train, headed back towards New York and Newark, wherever we were getting off. And that was a fun day.
It's cool that you can do that, but you're saying, but it's like a group travel thing. So that's awesome to do. So can you ever, like as a group, like a family gathering, right? Say, hey, let's all go on a train and then contact a railroad and say, hey, or a train company and say, we want to do this. Can you do that? Does that happen?
Yeah. Amtrak, you can book a group, no problem. Amtrak has a little bit of a deal there. For every 20 people that you book in a group, the next person goes free. So you have to inquire about that. But for every 20 paying passengers in that group, the organizer goes free, or another person goes free.
So you can spread that around each other or not. If you're doing the work,
And you can,
don't be surprised.
You can fill a whole entire coach with the whole group.
Yeah. And if you're doing the work, because that's the thing, you're doing the work and you have to get people on the same, planet, and I honestly, anybody rallying people together, I say, let them have the free coach, let them have the free seat basically. But trains, like, what is it for you when you travel on a train? is it the scenery? Is it seeing the farms, the houses, the cities as you go by? What is it for you? I mean, is your head out the window, like literally looking out?
To me, it's the scenery. To me, it's the scenery. It's the people I'm with. It's also just the opportunity to just to pass the time, you know. And there's one more thing that on the train that you don't have that you do have on the plane: cabin pressure. And my last time when I came home from Tampa back in April, my ears were a mess, and I had to call out sick from work. And you don't get that on the train. There is no descent pressure. You don't feel that the entire time, and that makes the trip all the more worthwhile. That makes the trip all the more exciting and refreshing.
Well, as you know, we travel, my mom, Nancy, and I travel the country full time, documenting parks and public lands. So we drive a lot, right? I drive a ton, and I've drive through all kinds of weather, and like literally, but, honestly, I'm thinking about the train experiences I've had in different countries. And I think, as a kid, it was so enamored. Like it just was like this, because I read so many historic novels, and train travel was a part of that history. Was the meeting place for people. It was the goodbyes, the hellos. It's romantic, right? And then when you go on one, you're like, ooh, and before your segment here on the podcast, one of our guests was talking about when she was a kid going to the train as a kid, she put on white gloves, and I'm like, what? I know her. She's an artist. She's a gardener. And I'm like, you wore white gloves? Like, really? She did, because it was such a big deal to go on a train. And I'm like, wow. And the trains I were on were mostly in Africa, and like you put your head out and they're like, don't do that. You'll get coal in your eye, so a little different. And then I've done them in England, and I have not done a train in this country. I don't believe, in my memory, but mostly Africa. So that's a little different experience, but Africa also has some very, prestigious ones, depending on what country and experience. But, there's something about the fact that when you do road tripping, which I'm an avid fan and do it, and that's my lifestyle, when you're on a train, when you're getting back to the people, in a way, everybody can see where you're traveling through and have a conversation in front of each other. Like, in other words, people aren't in the back seat and people are in the front seat. So you can't see each other, hear each other properly. One person's driving, so that person's stressed out. No one is stressed out. Everyone is just sitting there looking out the window and having a conversation. Isn't that quite a difference?
Yeah, just last week, my parents and my brother, they had to drive home from Tampa to get away, because they were supposed to fly home Wednesday, but unfortunately Hurricane Milton got in the way. They were supposed to fly home a day early then, but because the storm strengthened, they just said, you know what, we're getting in the car, we're driving north. So
just like we did, we probably passed them, or they passed us. We did the same thing.
Maybe you did, and I envy them. I don't know how they can do that. They've done that kind of trip before, but that's just not kind of trip I can tolerate.
Well, you're up to New Jersey, right? You're talking about Tampa to New Jersey.
Right. From driving from Tampa all the way up to Jersey, I would not be able to tolerate that kind of driving. That's just,
well, you better not do my career. Yeah.
Just recently, Amtrak announced a new route called the Floridian, and that's going to replace the Capital Limited, which Chicago to Washington, and the Silver Star, which is New York, Miami. So it's those two routes in one. So the train's going to depart Union Station, Chicago, and it's going to stop in Pittsburgh, in DC, and also in Tampa on its way to Miami. So it's those two routes in one. Since you already have the Silver Meteor, New York to Miami, there was no need to have the Silver Star. And since there's no train out of Chicago to the southeast to Florida, I applaud that idea to have a train from Chicago to Miami.
I love that idea. I think that's Chicago to Miami sounds good, doesn't it? I mean, think about the food changes. I mean, okay, can we talk about food on Amtrak? What do you, good or bad?
I didn't hear you.
The food on Amtrak. How is the food? If you're going to go from Chicago to Miami, are we going to be eating the same thing the whole way?
Well, the dining car, you have a general menu. You're going to have your steak. You're going to have your baked potato. You're going to have your pancakes. You're going to have your French toast. Your typical menu.
Oh, but, I like that though. That's good. Yeah.
But the most important thing is they do seating in the dining car in 15-minute intervals because the galley on board, is only so big. So they can only handle people at a certain time interval. So the dining car attendant will come to your sleeper car and make sure there's somebody in your family, somebody in your party who is like a delegate, and you can tell that the dining attendant what time you're going to have dinner, so that way they fit you into the 15-minute interval. So that way everyone's taken care of in a 15-minute time cycle. Because that way the kitchen does not get tied up.
Yeah, because I was thinking that in the previous discussions before your segment here, we were talking about trains and how, the Orient Express and, food is a big deal, and that is a huge part of the experience, these kinds of trips, like, even, in South Africa, we talked about the blue train there, and, there's so many train experiences from these, high speed ones coming in Asia, and there's just so many different experiences, and food is part of it. But I'm going like, it's like being on a cruise ship and how bed and breakfast, like in a mansion. You could have a mansion of a bed and breakfast, but their kitchen is tiny because it's so historic, and that's how they were back then. So it's like these cooks are moving in small quarters to make this happen. That's what's amazing to me, that they're making it happen. So they obviously have their way of doing it. I want to ask you, what is your most memorable train trip, whether it's Amtrak or a different one in another country? What for you, just when you think about it, really makes you smile?
Too bad you don't see my face, but I'm already grinning because my family and I, we're taking the Broadway Limited from Chicago back to Newark, New Jersey. And I was like 6 years old. And somehow our travel agent made a big mistake, booked us on the wrong day. So when we got to Union Station, we were expecting to be in two separate cabins on board. No, they had us squeezed into one cabin alone. So that during that night during the overnight portion of the trip, my dad and my brother were on the top bunk. My mom and I were on the bottom bunk. Now, at the time, my dad was kind of a very heavy guy, and when it was morning, when the sun broke through the window, my mom and I were like, please do not fall down on us. Because my dad and my brother, being on the bunk ahead, created this bulge almost in our nose, almost touching our faces. And we're like, please do not fall down. Please do not fall on top of us. And
Wow.
I'm just that was that, but that didn't happen. But it was quite an evening.
But that's that thing, right? Where travel has these experiences. And it's kind of interesting
It
about
has
this
its funny
train.
moment.
It's funny moments, detours, and that's what we talked about in the previous segment is these detours that happen are actually happy accidents in a way, right? Don't you find
Yes,
that as a traveler?
yes,
Yeah, they're good. You know, we can lose our cool as we travel. And so many times I can tell you, as we travel the country, we're delayed in a pileup or delayed in some way. And we just go, you know what? Let's just go veer off and just go into the town or whatever and just get away. And we'll find out this huge accident. And we were delayed for some reason. We could have been in that accident if we weren't
yeah.
delayed. And I think people have to realize that. Like, whenever there's a delay, something traumatic happened to someone. And it could have been you. And we need to kind of have that grace of understanding and reminder of slow the heck down. Trains do derail. There's some horrific things that have happened, but it's not like when I believe, when you look at cruises, trains, and airplanes, they're safer than getting on the highway. I think what we do, I always like go, God, we do so much traveling. We travel full time we travel back and forth, up and down across this country. And I go, you know what? We have the hardest one. Our odds are against us because most people can't drive. And so we have a sea of people who can't drive that we have to navigate through, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone makes a mistake and it can affect you. But trains, yes, once in a blue moon, a train derails. Once in a blue moon, a airplane has an issue. Once in a blue moon, a ship has a problem, a cruising ship. But when you look at the statistics, don't you think all of the trains, cruises, and just looking at that, and airplanes have a lower statistic in travel issues of like disaster? I think. I don't want to be against road tripping because I'm huge about it. It's my life.
There's
It's
nothing
my
wrong with
lifestyle.
road
But I
trip.
think our statistics are a little rough compared to yours.
I tell you, taking the train is my kind of road tripping. And if you meet people along the way in the in the way in the way that you enjoy doing so.
Yeah.
And I think the one trip that I remember, my family, we really met a lot of people. We were taking the Vermonter from Newark to my uncle's place. He lived in White River Junction. He's deceased now. But this was back in '03. We were taking the train up, and it was bitter cold. Picture Vermont during the winter. It's bitter cold. And as when we got to New Haven, at the time they were putting two engines, one at the front, one at the back, because there is a switchback near Palmer, Mass, which is just east of Springfield. And so as we were north of New Haven, one of the two engines broke down. So the engine pushing at the rear had to push us the rest of the way at 20 miles an hour. And when we finally got to Springfield, we had to swap the bad engine out with an engine that was there. So we finally got underway, and we were a good 3 hours late getting into White River Junction. But when we stepped off the train in White River, whoa, it was 12 below zero. And it seems like everyone stepping off the car, stepping out of our coach. It's like, I wasn't expecting this. And that was the conversation on the platform as we got out of the train. Like, I didn't sign up for this. I wasn't expecting it to be this cold. And then 2 days later, when we were heading home in the morning, it was as bitter cold as the night we got there. And that was the conversation once again. Was it this cold this morning?
Yeah. We have that as drivers too. I want to ask you about the history of train travel. Does that intrigue you as a train traveler to understand the history of how it's shaped America?
Oh yes, I'm an American history major from college, so I did my American studies thesis. My thesis was called "The American Railroad: The Tracks Before and Ahead," and in many portions of my project, I spoke about how the railroad was back then, from the turn of the century to where the railroad was struggling in the 50s and the 60s, to its rebirth in the 80s and 90s, and now it's a must-have because nobody wants. It's a viable means of transportation. It's a viable means of traveling, and it's environmentally friendly.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, trains, there's stuff that can happen and people need to understand that. It's like, we talked about this in the previous episode. One of our guests was like, well, no, stuff happens and you need to become a traveler at that point. If you're looking at commuting, you need to understand when you travel long distance on a train, you can have some major hiccups.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the same as an airplane. And I think it's the same on anything because every travel experience is going to have a hiccup. It is. But I think you're really right. The environmentally friendly part of it, the fact that it's public transportation, it's more cost effective, right? In ways for cities. Europe figured this out before America did, yet this is how we settled the West, right? Part of it. And I hate saying that. Every time I say settled the West, it makes me cringe because of the indigenous cultures who have been there for years. And it sounds terrible because it is. How we settled the West was not nice. As Anglos went in and said, hey, we're going to take over your territory and do all these things. But the railroad just is what made civilization happen, right? So it's this it's a good and bad history of how civilization works. And civilization, that's a whole other topic, right? But if it wasn't for the railroad, we were in Erie, Pennsylvania at a museum, and they had these waffle irons that's where the waffle iron comes from. They were being done there. It's an industrial town, Carnegie and all those people around that area. And this was the industrial thing. They make the waffle irons. And when you're sitting there looking at this going, they had this whole thing about how the railroad made these waffle irons get everywhere. Now, we all love waffles. The Southeast loves waffles. We have waffle houses. The West loves waffles. But how did we get the waffle irons to have waffles? Well, it was from trains that made the waffle popular. And I remember standing in this museum looking at all these different waffle irons and cast iron in Pennsylvania is like a big deal. But if it wasn't for trains, this commerce would not happen. Uh-huh. This invention would not have actually worked. So someone can create something, but if it wasn't for a train, it wouldn't have happened. It was like the waffle, who doesn't like a good waffle, and it would never have happened if it wasn't for a train. And that was what part of that display in the museum. I couldn't believe it. It changed everything for me about the importance of trains and what we think we have. We go eat a waffle, and do we realize that trains helped our waffles get there? I know it sounds weird, but do you think that too, David? As you travel on the train?
Well, now you mention it, when I'm in the cafe car, some of the they got some stuff in that cafe car that you thought you'd never see on the menu. Between special wines, beers, I mean, even a nuker, I mean, a microwave, and at least they got that available. Uh, I would like to see, I like to see Amtrak, you know, I like to see them bring aboard a hot dog roller cooker, so that way they don't have to nuke hot dogs on board anymore. That's
Mm.
one thing I would like to see them change.
But now, what about, can you take your own food and drink on an Amtrak?
You can. There's no one stopping you. Especially if you're going on an all day journey. Let's say from Newark to Savannah, Georgia. That's a 14-hour ride at least. And the cafe car is great, but the supplies can run low, and it can get a little old in the tooth. And also, if you have a medical needs or dietary needs, you should bring additional nourishment with you. So, go to the supermarket, go to the produce department, buy yourself a fruit salad, make yourself a garden salad at the salad bar. Go to the deli and fix yourself or buy
That's when you stop or before you get on?
stock up on that stuff the day before going, and carry it in a cooler bag, and that way because Amtrak allows up to 2 carry-ons per person, so you got your carry-on suitcase and your cooler bag with all your nourishment stuff. So that way you got something, you have all your additional food besides the cafe car.
Okay, what happens if you have more luggage than that? Like if I'm going to bring an entire suitcase, what happens?
Well, your Amtrak allows up to 4 pieces of checked luggage. You're allowed up to 4 pieces of baggage. So you're allowed, the first 2 pieces of luggage are free. The next 2 are $20 a piece.
Okay. So what if you want to ride the Amtrak like all over? Like, do you have to do from A to B, or can you book it like, hey, I want to go across country and do all these different things and just stay on the train? Can you do that?
Yes, you can. One of my craziest itineraries I've been thinking about, and it's just predicated upon time available. I want to take the Lakeshore Limited from New York Penn to Chicago Union Station, and then hours after arriving in Chicago, take the Southwest Chief from Chicago to LA, and then once arriving in LA, I would stay overnight in LA, and then the next day take the Coast Starlight from Los Angeles up to Seattle. You ride up the California coast all the way up through Oregon and into Washington. And then once arriving in Seattle, stay overnight there, kick around a little bit, depending on what time of the year. You just got to kind of have the piece of your itinerary together, think about what you want to do. And then from Seattle to Chicago, take the Empire Builder back to Chicago, and then from now with the Capital Limited ceasing operation next month, it's going to be the Floridian. So I was thinking of taking the Floridian down to Miami, and then take the Silver Meteor back up towards Newark.
So in all of this, we didn't talk about this in the beginning episode segment. So you have bathrooms on board. Are there showers on board an Amtrak or any trains at all?
In the new sleeping cars, they do. The older sleeping cars did not have those. You sort of had to make do without them overnight or at least 2 nights. But the newer sleeping cars of now, on the sleeper car, on the super liners, or in the Viewliners on the eastern routes, they do have showers on board.
Wow.
It
Wow. But
still,
it's not going to be private though. It's going to be kind of community, right?
they are private.
What? Are you kidding me? You get
They are
your own
private,
private.
so it's like
Wow.
it's like kind of having the toilet in with the shower.
Oh, I see what you mean. But it's your own.
Similar to how European bathrooms are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's your own. That's like huge, isn't it? In train travel, that's a huge step to have.
It's a huge step, but it's better than nothing.
I think it's great. I think it's great. I kind of feel like sometimes because we travel full time, like just like saying, okay, we're going to do Amtrak for a year and see what happens. I kind of feel,
Good.
I mean, because you have Wi-Fi on board, right? So we
Yes.
could still work a bit, right? Is the
Yes.
Wi-Fi good?
I've never tried the Wi-Fi. I'm usually texting or I'm surfing the web on my phone. So the Wi-Fi is good because they do have Wi-Fi receivers in the coaches.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you've got your train. So that was my next question to you was, what's your next idea? But you seem to have a bucket list there. So I hope you do it. And David, it was good to have you back on the show. Everyone, again, keep up with David. He's got a great newsletter too. And people can sign up right on your website, right, for your newsletter because you send out an article all the time. You got me on your
I
newsletter.
always had a new article on my website. My newest article is about my family's extraordinary hurricane history. Because in the past years we have dealt with some hurricanes in our travel experiences. I've dealt with one when I was a Disney World cast member, and so I speak about 3 hurricanes that we had our brushes with, and I think if you go to my website and you read that article, you'll be touched.
Everyone, it's dektraveljournal.com. Check it out. And now we're going to go to Steve Schneickert's Hollywood history about, the movie Railroad. Check it out. Thank you so much, David.
Take care of yourself, Lisa.
Come ride the little train that is rolling down the tracks to the junction. Lots of curves, you bet. Even more when you get to the junction. Hollywood history. Located in Jamestown, in the heart of California's gold country, Railtown 1897 State Historic Park is home to an intact and still functioning steam locomotive. This one-of-a-kind attraction combines industrial heritage and railroad history with the lore and intrigue of Hollywood's film industry. Railtown 1897's most famous and widely seen locomotive is movie star number 3, which has charmed the public either at the movie theater or viewing from the television set in the comfort of their homes. The first known filming on the train took place in 1919 with a silent serial called The Red Glove, directed by J.P. McGowan. Unfortunately, the film footage is considered lost. The first sound recording film using the train, away from an indoor set, was 1929's The Virginian, starring Gary Cooper and Walter Houston, and directed by Victor Fleming. Too numerous to mention all of the films that movie star number 3 appeared, I will choose some that stuck out in my mind. Universal's 1940, My Little Chickadee, directed by Edward F. Klein and starring Mae West, W.C. Fields, with Margaret Hamilton. Ms. West wrote the original screenplay. Both stars spoofed themselves and the Western genre, with West providing a series of her trademark double entendres. In 1940, MGM released Young Tom Edison, a biographical film about the early life of the inventor, casting Mickey Rooney as Thomas Edison. Stanley Kramer Productions' 1952's epic High Noon Do not forsake me, oh my darling, starring Gary Cooper with Grace Kelly and directed by Fred Zinnemann. In nearly real time, the film tells the story of a town marshal forced to face a gang of killers by himself. High Noon won 4 Academy Awards and 2 Golden Globe Awards. In 1965, there was The Great Race, starring Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and Natalie Wood, directed with great comic timing by Blake Edwards. Warner Brothers released to the public in 1969 The Great Bank Robbery with Zero Mostel, Kim Novak, Clint Walker, and Claude Akins. 1976 brought us Bound for Glory, an autobiographical film about Woody Guthrie. This train is bound for glory, this train, starring David Carradine. Chattanooga Choo Choo was a 1984 film released as a light summer comedy featuring the eponymous train. Pardon me, boys, is that the Chattanooga Choo Choo? Starring Barbara Eden and George Kennedy. The year 2000 brought Redemption of the Ghost, starring Diane Ladd and John Savage. I wonder if the hand was on the train also. Television programs movie star number 3 made regular appearances on are as follows: The Lone Ranger, Hi-Yo Silver, Kimosabe, Tales of Wells Fargo, Rawhide, Rollin', 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 keep them doggies rollin'. Death Valley Days. This series was sponsored by the Pacific Borax 20 Mule Team Borax Boraxo, hosted by many. However, one particular name stands out to me. Former President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. Bum, 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 bum. The list continues with the Wild Wild West, Iron Horse, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, bum, 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 bum,